Alright guys, I got a Murray Select here, 40-inch cut that a customer dropped off. Tell me he's got a belt issue. The old belt was all torn up. I'll show you that in a few minutes. So I put the new belt on, and of course after you do that you got to test the machine. So I fired it up and it seemed to start just fine and idle just fine, but every time I went to put it in gear it wanted to die. So let me show you that real quick. See how it wants to die as soon as I put it in gear? Things you run into when you get a customer machine. It's got no shut off on this. I'm sure he's aware of that. And the oil keeps coming loose, the oil cap, and he's almost out of oil. So I'm going to throw some oil in it for him. But I want to see if you can see the problem here. Let me take this out for a second. Sorry about it all being shaky. But the first thing you want to check, especially in Florida, is your filter. And I don't know if you can see that, but the whole bottom of this filter is filled with water. That means there's water in the tank. And that means there's water in the carburetor bowl. So if you find that you've got an issue, it's because your filter, your carburetor, all could be filled with water. So I'm going to pull that apart and I'm going to show you what I can find here. Now, sorry about my neighbor cutting his grass. I don't know why, but it's taken him 3 days to cut it. But you can't always help what people are doing. So anyway, what we got here, just gonna take this off. I'm gonna shut off the fuel. I got myself a white container. I'm gonna take this off. We're gonna take that off. And we're going to drain that into our white container. And sometimes it won't drain. So you get both sides out. So let me show you what was in that filter. We're going to go inside the shop because it's pretty bright out here today. And I'm going to take you out of the stand. Now again, I make these videos for my customers, but anybody else can take a look too. Now you see all the gunk and dirt and crap and garbage in there, but you see this banana looking thing over here? That is water. See how it moves? That's water. Water always sinks to the bottom of your fuel. So not only is the fuel nasty, but half of that was water. I'm going to take the fuel cutoff out of the bottom of the carburetor here, right here. Usually takes a 1/2 inch wrench. You take that out. I'm also going to test it because he's got no fuel, he's got no shut off. So normally, at least if that valve is working, it should shut off the fuel. But I'm going to pull that out real quick and we're going to take a look at the fuel and see what happens. So I'm going to dump this fuel out here in the garbage. So we're starting clean. Let me get a 1/2 inch wrench. Now most people will tell you, and the second I say this I'll need one, most people will tell you that in order to pull this off you have to take a wrench and you have to grind the crap out of it and make it real thin. I come across 2 or 3 of those a year, and I work on hundreds of these. Most of the time a regular standard, this is a Cobalt brand, wrench will fit on there just fine. Loosen it up. I rarely do I need a specially thinned out wrench to fit in there. There's usually more than enough space. So that stuff was pretty nasty, but if I can stop that from rolling away, I do not see any water in there. So the water was in the fuel filter. Now there's a buttload of dirt in there, if you can see that. There's a lot of dirt in there, and that fuel is yellow. Should not be yellow. That will all stop your carburetor from working. All the little dirt particles in there, and they're pretty big. They're big as the size of a grain of rice. Will all get up and clog the jets of your carburetor. Now I'm going to plug this back in. I unplugged it to turn it on. Back this up a little bit. And what I want to do is turn the key on. And if you ground this to something, you should be able to see that little plunger work. Okay, and this one has its own ground, so I didn't even have to do that. The plungers are normally in the out position. Hopefully you can see that past my knee. It can go in, it always finds its way back out. You turn the key on, and it pulled itself right in. So I know this solenoid is good. Don't get out your own meters and all that crap and try and test all that. You turn the key on, if that thing sucks in, it works. When you turn it off, if it pushes back up, it works. It's an electromagnet. Now, if it didn't have a ground correctly, sometimes you'll have to touch it to a metal part of the engine to make a ground, and then it'll suck it in. Watch, it sometimes bites you. You might get a little shock. But that's it, it works. We didn't have any water in the carburetor, but what was happening was it was sucking the water from that old fuel filter along with the gas, and it was putting water into the carburetor. So instead of putting that old nasty fuel filter back on it, we're going to put a new filter on. Couldn't find my box with my filters in it. These paper filters, most people don't know how to put them on. It really doesn't matter. I like to put the fuel in from the top so that it fills this whole bell up and then sucks through the paper and goes where it needs to go. Sometimes there'll be an arrow on it and sometimes not, like in this case. So I'm going to put this back on. Now this may not be the only problem that this machine has. Actually, I'm thinking about draining this fuel since it is yellow and nasty. I mean, the engine should burn it, no problem. I see a tiny bit of water in there, so I'm going to go ahead and drain that at least a little until that water goes away. The water always sinks to the bottom below the fuel. So if you see some water in your tank, thankfully this is a white tank. and it's a gravity feed, and you see how nasty that stuff is coming out. So it's yellow, and I got most of the gunk out of it now. That's nasty. I don't know how well you can see that in the camera, but that's like Mr. Hulk taking a pee-pee. If you pee and it looks that color, you're dehydrated. In this case, the fuel is just getting old. But I'm gonna run this thing dry today anyway. I just want to put these back on. With our new fuel filter, I'm going to turn the fuel back on. We're not getting any fuel in here. That thing is kind of too long for this. It really should be this away, but we might have an issue with this on-off shut-off valve too. I don't like using these things. I know they put them on there. This tractor did not come with a shut-off valve. Somebody put that on themselves. And people put them on there when they start having trouble with their carburetor. Try to shut something off. Of course, I can't find my cutters. None of your tools are where you leave them. You use the stupid things every single day, yet they're never where you leave them. And I don't have any kids running around, so nobody's stealing my tools. They're just never where I leave them. Alright, it finally filled up. I don't particularly like that. What I'm going to do is take this valve out of here. He might have put it on so that he could turn off the tractor when he's finished with it. You saw the issue I had trying to make this thing stop. Some people will put a fuel shut off for that reason. Because if you shut off the fuel, then eventually the machine will shut off. This fuel line is shot too, it just ripped in my hand. So I'll probably end up putting a new one on afterward. But for right now, I want to make sure that we're getting full fuel to this thing. Make sure your solenoid's hooked back up. Make sure everything's out of the way. And I don't know if we're still filming. But hopefully we are. Yeah, it looks like we are. So let's see if she'll run now. There's not enough fuel coming out through that paper filter. Most people don't realize they think they're going to want to buy the paper filters because they're more expensive and they're going to filter your stuff better. Well, your problem is on gravity feed tanks, there's not enough pressure to run your filter, to run your fluid through your filter. Okay, there just isn't. So you have to use these. This is just a screen filter. There's not enough pressure with the fuel in the tank to push it down through that paper filter and into your tank. So for now, I just want to make sure this thing's gonna run. switch. So let me figure out what's going on and I'll get back with you in a minute. When you put it in gear and it starts to die, that's usually a safety switch somewhere. And we're gonna figure that out. All right, she just died again. I wanted to show you. I have the brake on now. It's locked in gear. And I'm messing with the choke. And now it doesn't want to run at all. My guess is that because he's got no shut off on this thing, he's been either choking it out or running it all the way down, then turning that off. Between the nasty fuel that's in there, she'll run on choke pretty well. But as soon as I try to put power on it from something, it doesn't want to run anymore. So I'm going to have to pull off that carburetor and see what I can find on the inside of it. That's all there is to it. Alright, I'm gonna pull this carburetor off real quick. I drained the fuel. You see it's dripping a little, it won't hurt anything out here in the grass. So we're gonna pull this carburetor off because I gotta see what's going on the inside of this thing. Carburetors come off pretty easy, and it looks like I'm gonna have to take that stupid thing off. Okay, I'm gonna have to take this off. Now the carburetor's off. Give me a second. Fucking Murray's. Okay, so I had to loosen this top. There's two bolts up here. They were 7/16. And you just loosen that and that comes off. It's just an elbow. Don't lose your O-ring. Okay. Then we've got two little bolts here, which I believe are 8 mil. Use it deep so you can reach them. That's the 9. That's the 8. Okay. Now what I did notice up here when I went to take this cover off, there's some water in there. That's rainwater most likely. And that's not an 8mm. Love working on these machines. Love it! Absolutely. These are not going to be long enough to fit on there. Of course they're not. Let's try these. That's in the way. way too small. Okay. So it is supposed to be the 8. It's just not. I'm not editing this thing down. So if you want to fast forward, fast forward. But it takes longer to edit these videos than it does to work on these machines, and I'm not doing it. The 8 won't fit. Alright, I'm gonna kill it and be back. Alright, I had to break into my old set to find. The problem with all these damn new sets is that there's 12 point and 16 point. And they won't catch anything that's got a rounded off tip. It is a number 8, but I needed a 6-point socket to make it work. And these bolts were tightened in so much, I couldn't even get them off with a pair of vice grips. So, when you're dealing with lawnmowers, stop tightening your shit so much. Everybody's so worried about torque specs. It's a toy. It's a lawnmower. This metal carburetor is being screwed into a plastic fitting. Stop torquing your crap down. It's not supposed to be like that. Somebody actually added a spring here, which is fine. I've seen it before. I've done it myself. Trying to salvage a carburetor that either needs to be cleaned or replaced, and they put a spring on here to try to keep that working correctly. Now we have spring up here and we have our linkage, so let's take those off. Now our carburetor's free. I'm going to take this inside. I'm going to take a look at it. Alright. Now, I need my 1/2-inch wrench. Don't mind my workspace when you work on crap every single day. You can't keep these stupid things clean. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen. You're lucky if you clean this thing once a week. I straighten up on the regular. Pretty much every day. But I gave up a long time ago. Trying to keep my workspace clean. I straightened up this morning and it's already a mess. And this is a carburetor I installed yesterday on a rider. Well, there's a little bit of dirt and a little bit of water in there, but nothing big. Take the float off. Actually, I want to make sure that float is sealing. It looks a little bit low, but alright, it's sealing just fine. Take that back out. Don't lose your needle. Right there, little needle. Don't lose your gasket. Doesn't look great, but it doesn't look too bad. These carburetors, if you buy them from Briggs, Rotary, any of the brand names for these riders, they're about 150 bucks. And this is September, end of September 2021. They're between 125 and 150 bucks. You can buy Chinese carburetors for about $40. Half the time they work, half the time they don't. Well, there's your problem. That is the top of one of your jets. And that, my friend, is not supposed to be like that. That's the top of a jet. Okay, that goes just like that. Somebody been in this thing? It's not supposed to be like that. There's usually 2 tubes. In this case, we don't have 2 tubes. So I'm not sure why that thing I mean, you see it every once in a while. You see if somebody's been in there, somebody will try and work on it themselves, or they'll have somebody else work on it. It'll break, then they'll stick it back together. Sometimes they get lucky. Now this thing was running, but the minute you try to put any kind of power on it, obviously it was dying. And that's usually from clogged or broken jets in your carburetor. Now, they don't seem to be bad at all. I wonder if that extra part, that extra piece, see, there's not even any place for it inside of here. You have your emulsion tube with your jets in it right here, and this is your needle and seat valve, and that's it. Everything else is internal on this thing. So to have that piece does not make a whole lot of sense. Now this thing is supposed to be that tall. Oh, that's what it is. Yep, that's what it is. This is off the top of this tube. That is off the top of that tube, and it is broken. T's broke. And like I said, you can get cheap carburetors for, you know, 40 bucks or so. Half the time they don't work out of the box. And I always tell my people, do not do it if you're trying to take care of your machine. Because it, you know, it might work for a few cuts and then stop. It might not work out of the box. Half the time the stuff that comes from Japan, they say fits a dozen machines, and half the time it doesn't fit the machines that they say it fits, because they know that you only spent 40 bucks on it, and you're probably not gonna take the time and spend the shipping, because it costs you to ship that stuff back. To spend shipping, go to the post office and try to send that stuff back. They know half the time you're just gonna bite it. you're going to eat the cost and buy from somebody else. So they're not real worried about it. I don't have any problem with Japan or China or Korea, any of the places that parts come from. I really don't. I don't have a problem with the people. I've been to most of those countries. And they don't have the problems with Americans that our government wants us to think they do. It's all political bullshit. They're just living their lives too. But, you know, half the stuff that comes out of Japan just does not work that well. That's because the factories just throw the stuff together. The people that sell them don't always tell the truth. But I digress. That's probably what was causing the problem. I don't even think it's going to run now as good as it did when I took it off, because that emulsion tube is broken. Now that could have happened from vibration, could have happened because somebody took something apart they weren't supposed to. Could have happened for a bunch of reasons. It's just brass in there, and stuff happens. But what we're going to do is put this thing together. Maybe. Okay. Put this little homemade spring back on there. Make sure it's free and clear. Put these back where they belong. Now I'm not going to worry about putting this elbow back on. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It's only going to take a half a second. Now I'm not going to worry about it because this thing's probably going to come back off. This carburetor is probably going to need to be replaced. And it's going to be up to the customer whether they want to put on a proper one for 150 bucks plus labor, which the labor's, you know, pretty much being paid for anyway. If they want to do the $40 carburetor, it's completely up to them. But I got all my linkages back on. I got my cutoff solenoid. Let's clear all this tools. Now I got to put some fuel back in it because I drained all the fuel out. And let's see if she's gonna fire up. I don't think so with that broken emulsion tube, but we're going to find out as soon as I remember where I put my gas can. I had to go get gas for the other machine. Some fresh fuel in. Nice, clean, clear fuel. Now let's see if she'll start up and run any better. carburetor. And while we're here on the tic-tac end of this video, this is the Husqvarna all-wheel drive he brought to me and asked me to run through it. So she starts on one pull. We're gonna replace the carburetor on this Murray. Anyway, while I had it running earlier, I did test. I put the new belt on. Let's get rid of this tripod. I did put the new belt on. Bingo, bango, boingo. It's loose the way it's supposed to. And I engaged the blades and it worked just fine. The blades came on. Everything seems to be okay. So I'll see you soon.